Yes, there are many visual effects in those shots. So the campaign for this said, oh, there's no visual effects. There's 2,000 visual effects in Mad Max.
Oh,
you wouldn't
wow.
know. Oppenheimer, and there's a few movies these days that like to claim there's no visual effects in their movies. There's a lot of visual effects in his movies. And I think it makes for better behind the scenes if they're blowing up a bunch of gasoline tanks instead of doing it in the computer. They think it's cool to say, oh, we didn't use any CG. You know, I think Top Gun Maverick was a good example of they were all out there saying, we shot all the planes, and they did. But they also replaced them with CG versions of those planes later.
找到自己想要做的东西，
让我身边的人都过得很好。
只要够快乐，我觉得你就很成功。
嗨，Hello， 大家好，我是志祺，欢迎回到强者我朋友。说到电影特效，你可能会想到的是这些场面，但你知道吗？其实一些看似极为平凡的电影片段，也都可能有用到特效。可以说，特效已经是当今影视娱乐不可或缺的一部分了。无论是遁入异世界、飞到外太空、体验世界末日，或穿越回到过去，都能够靠它办得到。甚至呢，从游戏广告画面到 Instagram 的滤镜，其实也都跟动画特效息息相关。为了深入挖掘这些以假乱真的特效魔法背后有哪些秘辛，我们邀请到了入围过奥斯卡的动画总监 Matt Shumway 来聊聊。那强者我朋友强在哪里呢？首先他是世界顶尖动画特效工作室光影魔幻工业的动画总监，在好莱坞已经打滚了超过20年，参与过《星际大战》、《侏罗纪世界》、少年Pi的奇幻漂流，还有加菲猫等等等等，一共30多部知名电影的作品。甚至呢，他还曾经凭借着《神鬼猎人》一片获得了第88届奥斯卡最佳视觉效果奖的提名。那今天呢，我们就要请他来帮我们破解，到底要怎么样判断一段影像有没有用特效，怎么样子的特效最难做，这个产业背后又有哪些不为人知的秘辛呢？奥斯卡入围特效总监 Matt Shumway 还有重量级好莱坞作品动画师 Amy Lu 这次呢被知识卫星特聘来台开设特效动画专属课程，各种好莱坞的特效魔法都不藏私大公开啦。现在到课程的页面输入专属折扣码强者我朋友，还可以折350元，赶快点击资讯的连结看看吧。那么就请 Matt 老师呢先跟我们的观众简单自我介绍一下吧。
Hi, I'm Matt Shumway. I'm an animation supervisor at Industrial Light and Magic. We work on Hollywood films.
那今天除了我们之外呢，镜头外还有我们的企划素也会跟我们大家一起来聊聊。
Hello， 大家好，我是素。
好，那节目一开始我们想要直接来玩一个小游戏。素这边呢，他有准备了一些影片，想要请老师来判断看看，就是里面到底有没有使用特效。
Okay,
All right.
First one.
Sure, yes, there are many visual effects in those shots. So the campaign for this said, oh, there's no visual effects. There's 2,000 visual effects in Mad Max.
Oh,
you wouldn't
wow.
know. But I'm going to say that what you see there, real stuntmen and women are doing that. And they're on these giant rigs that are swinging back and forth. Very brave people. But yeah, it's a mix. I'd say this is like 70% real, 30% visual effects. So they tried to get as much real as possible, but then you can't get everything, or maybe you like some takes from different takes. So you're combining stuff. You'll see a lot of these scenes, maybe the foreground elements are real, and then the background, they've populated with more cars and vehicles. And so with almost all things that are real these days, there's a certain amount of visual effects to help support it.
好，那我们下一个。
You know, you could do this a couple different ways. You could have done it all for real if you have a good stuntman or woman, or you could have done it all completely digital. So I'm not sure. It's pretty dark. Yeah, the blood's composited, yeah. They often do that so they can do many takes and not have to clean it and start over again. David Fincher is famous for this in his movies, wanting to do the blood later because he can shoot 30 takes and then they'll add it in later.
Okay, next one.
Okay, yeah, this will be a mix as well. She's probably completely real. It looks like that's a costume and makeup that they're just inflating, which is great. And then she's probably on a wire rig because they're going to pick her up here in a second. And so what they would do is go ahead and do that, and then they would paint out the wires. And I think there's a shot looking up at the ceiling here too. That would be a completely fake digital ceiling that they've added in later. So this is a good healthy mix of the two as well. Oh, this is Parasite, yeah. So this is about the house, right? So they did digital extensions for the top of the house. And it's really just an economic thing. They didn't need to have the rest of the house, but they wanted an environment they can control and they can design the house exactly how they want. I think just the lower part is real. and then all the upper floors is all digital.
How can you tell that it's made?
I would love to tell you that I've got this keen eye that can see it, but I know exactly how they did this because I've seen the behind the scenes on how they did it. Yeah, it's very common to do set extensions. My first part of my career, I did matte painting work. I was on X-Men 2 back in the day. They build just enough to get what needs to be interacted with, and everything else can be digital because it saves a lot of money and time and they can adjust it later. But yeah, that was just one I knew.
Okay.The last one.
最后一个我要先补充一下，就是它其实不是电影，是一个广告。然后很多网友觉得这个绝对是假的，所以就想请老师判断一下。
I looked at this and it looks fake to me, but I don't think it is. I think they're shooting with a very fast shutter, so you're getting very little motion blur, which is kind of making it feel fake. But the thing that's making me think it's real is because the interaction with like all those leaves, dirt later on, and water is really, really well done if it's CG. So I'm not sure. I can't say 100% it's real or fake, but to me, I just know how difficult this would be to do if we were doing it digitally and how much time and energy it would take to do all that interaction with the ground. That kind of stuff is usually very expensive to do. So even in the bigger movies we work on, it's very limited when you choose to do interaction with that kind of stuff because that involves the effects department, makes lighting more difficult.
It's too good to be fake.
I think it's pretty good. It can be fake. I mean, we could do this level at ILM, but it would be expensive. So I don't know what kind of budget they had to trick the internet, but I hope it's real because it's cool.
那刚刚我们有看到一些就是很普通的场景，像是这个《寄生上流》里面，观众可能其实看不太出来这是特效，这种是好做的还是反而会很难？
From a visual effects standpoint, if you think of the grand things we do in visual effects, that's one of the easier effects to do, set extensions. Doesn't mean it's easy. It still takes talented artists to do that work and to be able to understand the lighting and how to build the textures. But if you compare it to, say, a fully realized digital character, that's much harder. That's much more difficult to build. So I would say it's one of the easier effects to do, but not easy. That makes sense.
Got it.
那我想要补问一个问题，就其实刚刚的题目里面有一个遗珠没有放进去，就是《John Wick》这部电影里面有一幕是狗狗在草地上大便，大概2秒钟的镜头，可是拍摄的时候狗狗一直大不出来，所以后来其实是他们花了5000块美元用特效做出来这个大便，所以这个大便也被称作是电影史上最昂贵的狗屎。那就想问老师说，为什么要花那么多钱啊？狗狗大便是很难做吗？
Okay, why is it expensive to make a dog poo? Well, it's actually, there's a lot of people involved to make that dog poo. So you have to think about, okay, you got this real dog. He's probably in the right position, so you don't have to do a CG dog. But you do have to track the dog, at least his butt, because you need it to not slip around, right, when the poo's coming out. So that'll take a layout artist to do that, and they cost a certain amount each week. And then they've also got to track the camera to make sure, so that's one person's job. And then you have to have the poo itself, which means you've got to have a modeler that's got to model the dog poo. And then you have to have a texture artist who's going to paint it to make sure it looks like dog poo.
And there's some liquid on it.
Yeah, exactly. That's effects. So you'll have the animator animate the poo. And then you'll have effects do any sort of liquid that ties with that. And then you have to light it, which means like our set here, you guys have the lights and render it. And then it'll take a compositor to put it in to the shot. So $5,000 is actually pretty cheap for that because you have to imagine all those people along the way. And then on top of that, you'll have to present it to the director and they'll have their notes and you have to go back and change it again. So you imagine there's a room full of like 15 people commenting on the glisten that's on the poo. So yeah, that's that's why it's often shocking to directors when we come back with bids and say, hey, we just want to add this one thing. Okay, that's going to be $5,000-$10,000. I'm like, oh my gosh, that's so much. Like, yeah, because there's a lot of people along the way to make that happen.
我好奇，就是拥有这样子的眼睛，你会不会在看电影的时候很常很出戏，然后就觉得啊，这个人做烂了？
Well, I don't know if it takes a keen eye to like completely tell that doesn't feel right. And that's why digital humans are very, very difficult because we all are used to looking at human. I think that's a bar we haven't quite fully reached yet. I think there's been some that have been really close and there's been shots that have been very convincing. But I think sometimes you just naturally feel like that doesn't feel right. Maybe you don't know why. And that's okay if you don't know why. And that's something we have to deal with all the time is like, we'll get notes that doesn't feel real and they won't say why. And we have to kind of figure it out. So you start to break it down and like, well, is the color off? Is it not integrating right? Is the movement weird? Like, you know, sometimes you'll animate a character and you realize from another angle it doesn't look right. And so you just have to dissect it. And because there's 1,000 things that go into every every shot. It could take some time to figure out what's not feeling right about it.
But can you still enjoy a movie?
Yeah, of course. I love movies. Yeah, you do be a little more critical of things at times, but I can let it go. I don't need to take my work with me. But I mean, it's hard for me to watch any animated character and not have some sort of judgment on it. But if it's great, it's great. And that's actually inspiring to see other people's work and be like, oh, I wish I could have worked on that. How cool would that have been?
想问一下，就是觉得你做最难的作品会是哪一个？
Boy, that's really tough. I think there's different challenges for different characters. Life of Pi,
Okay.
the tiger was incredibly challenging because it hadn't ever been done before, something to that level for that long on screen. The Revenant was very, very difficult because this bear attack was uncut for like 10 minutes. So we couldn't hide in the cut. So it was very difficult. It had to be very, very real and visceral. And then my latest project was bringing a very beloved 2D character in Lilo and Stitch to life and not only make it look great, but make the audience really happy that this 2D character that they love is now 3D. It's very challenging. It's not always successful, as we all know, with some of those translations. So that in itself was a very, very difficult and kind of stressful thing to get right partly because I love that character so much and I didn't want to let fans down. So maybe those 3 projects I would say are my most difficult.
我好奇，就是特效要看起来不假，最重要的到底是什么？就是怎么样才能够做到？
Oh, it's all about shooting it properly and getting all the information that you need. Shows like Life of Pi have to reach a very high level of realism, and the only way to do that is to look at the real thing. And it's great because we know what tigers look like, and they usually identify a tiger that this is our hero tiger. Match that, just make it look like that. So that immediately starts with research. We visited zoos. I had meerkats crawl all over me which was fantastic. That's the cool part, right? At the beginning. But it's not just because it's fun, but it's because you're actually sitting there looking at these and trying to figure out every little detail that you can. You talk to scientists, you do everything you can to make sure you've got as much information as you can, and then you need to build that into your characters. It's a process that takes time. The first few renders of that tiger did not look great, but we knew that. We weren't there yet. And it would take time until we get to a point where the director can't even tell the difference. And Aang was really smart. Each scene, they would shoot maybe 1 or 2 tiger shots, and then the rest would be digital. But it would be like the ground truth. This is what it should look like. So we'd always have something we can go back to and like, is that hair in the right spot? No, it's not. We got to fix it on our digital one. And it wasn't so much about copying it, but you had to get the essence of it because you need to hit the performance that Aang was looking for in that case. So yeah, it was always, when you present your work, you'd always have that reference there so the director or the VFX supervisor could look at it and go, nope, that's not right. See how the nail's turning a little bit there? Yeah. And we would get really, really hyper detailed on that to just literally how the fingernails. You saw some really gross anatomy of a skinned tiger that you could see exactly how the nail. It's really fascinating. Yeah. If you haven't seen it, I won't spoil it for you if you want to go look for it. It's not just like in and out. It's really pretty cool. It's a little bit like Wolverine. 那这样做下来，通常要花多少的时间啊？像少年拍这种特效超满的，你们会花多少时间去做它？ So Life of Pi took a few years to do. It took 2 or 3 years for us to make, but it's a combination of things. It's not just like one shot take a week or whatever. It took us a couple years just to build that tiger. So that's an asset that would be used in, 400 shots. So you'd build that, get that to look real, and we do all sorts of test footage that we would show Aang. And, once we got it to a point where he couldn't tell what was real and what was CG, then it was ready to go into shots. And then a typical shot would take maybe 3 weeks to do. Okay. And then you've got to times that by how many shots are in the movie. I can't remember the exact number on that movie, but there was probably close to 800 to 1,000 shots that we had to do. So to get that done, you needed a very large team. It's a process that it's hard to just say it takes 1 week to do something like that, but it overall takes 2 to 3 years to pull something like that off.
听起来流程很多，就是你们的工作爆肝是一个常态吗？就是你们的工时大概会到多长吗？
It's gotten better over the years. When I first started my career, like 20 plus years ago, overtime was pretty bad. And you would be working 7 days a week, 14-hour days. It's fine when I was in my 20s and no big deal. I had all the energy in the world. And honestly, all your friends are at work anyway. So it's kind of like school. But as you get older, that gets old after a while. And like, you know what? I just need my own time. And sometimes you just want to decompress. And the studios have recognized that's not sustainable. And it's also very expensive to put people on overtime. After a certain amount of hours, they would have to pay you double overtime. But it doesn't mean that we're done with overtime. Usually on most projects, the last few months of the project, you end up doing a lot of extra time to try because you're running out of time to get everything done. So overtime definitely still happens, and it depends on the studio you're at. I think ILM has been pretty good about kind of finding that balance, which I really appreciate.
刚我们已经了解到说，像是特效它是非常复杂的，而且刚刚又会有这些加班的问题。这让我注意到一件事情，就是2012年的时候，少年Pi他们拿下了这个奥斯卡最佳的视觉效果奖，但是同时这部片的特效公司他们也申请了破产。老师方便跟我们分享一下当时到底发生什么事情了吗？
Yeah, That was really unfortunate. I think Rhythm & Hughes is a really great place to work, and it's kind of a combination of a lot of things. The studios, the visual effects studios, when they bid for a project, they bid for kind of it's a fixed sum. So if it's, we'll say $100, and once you run out of that money, you're out of that money. That's what you bid. And sometimes projects can be more difficult.
Yeah.
It wasn't just Life of Pi. We had several projects in the building, and several of them delayed, which meant that we weren't getting paid any extra, but the studio wanted to retain all the artists, so they were kind of losing money by holding on to these artists. And then just the economics of visual effects for the studios, it's very thin margins for profitability. So any sort of delay like that kind of messes things up. So they just essentially just ran out of money. They tried their best to kind of work things out with to sell the company to another company, and it just fell through at the last minute, and we all lost our jobs. It was really unfortunate timing because we felt like we were kind of at the top of our game with Life of Pi. We worked really hard on that one. We had just won the Oscar, and at the same time, we were all trying to find new jobs. So it's unfortunate for visual effects, and it's still kind of like that. It's still very, very, and that's why you'll see companies like the moving picture company who was, just did Lion King or Mufasa. They also just went through the same thing. They just declared bankruptcy, and all those artists lost their jobs. It seems to happen every couple of years that there's a major company that kind of falls apart. I don't know if there's a good fix for it yet, and it's something that's always on the back of our mind as visual effects artists, that you could be one movie away from your company going under, and I think every company's trying to find the best way to deal with that, but I don't think there's been a strong solution yet.
那最近有一些类似的事情嘛，就是借由奥本海默拿到奥斯卡这个特效公司在去年传出了裁员100人的这个消息，那有媒体说这好像就是象征着特效产业的衰退，你会认同这样子的想法吗？
No. There's no downfall of visual effects. There's more visual effects in movies than ever before. Oppenheimer, and there's a few movies these days that like to claim there's no visual effects in their movies.
Yeah.
And that was a big thing for Oppenheimer. There's a lot of visual effects in his movies. They like to downplay it because CG somehow is like you're cheating or something if you don't shoot it for real. And I think it makes for better behind the scenes if they're blowing up a bunch of gasoline tanks instead of doing it in the computer. But yeah, I don't see it as any sort of downfall. I think there's more work than there's ever been before because of the streaming. But it's also more competitive, so people are bidding tighter and tighter and tighter. That's what happens recently with MPC. They went bankrupt. So we're kind of in a weird place right now because there's more work than ever, but it's harder and harder to make profit on that. I think everyone's just trying to navigate what that's going to be. Certainly during COVID, there was a huge rise in the amount of content needed, kind of way overhired, and then it kind of corrected a little bit afterwards. And now we're kind of getting into another place where, there's lots of new projects and things coming along. So I certainly don't see any sort of fall of visual effects because people need it.
我好奇，就是电影圈真的有在崇尚这个无特效吗？因为刚刚我们看到，就奥本海默就是讲说自己是没有特效的，这是真的有吗？
Sometimes. It's like I said, they think it's cool to say, we didn't use any CG. I think Top Gun Maverick was a good example of they were all out there saying, we shot all the planes, and they did. But they also replaced them with CG versions of those planes later. So they went out and shot a bunch of cool stuff, but they kind of ignored the fact that they replaced them later because that's not cool sounding as much as Tom Cruise flying in an airplane. So honestly, it's more marketing than anything. I don't know if general audiences really care if it's CG or not, but the filmmakers, it's like a point of pride that they didn't use CG on something, even though they use it all the time to fix things. So it is pretty annoying to us because it's kind of downplaying our role in the movies, but I don't have a marketing degree, so maybe there's some market research that says don't say CG, and so they're really leaning into that. But I do know, if you watch any of those films, the ones that have no CG in them, there's like a wall of names of visual effects artists at the end. I don't think there is really any movie nowadays that doesn't have some sort of visual effects component, because it doesn't have to be big in-your-face type stuff, but there's a lot of fixes and adjustments that are done all the time.
那最近其实还有另外一件事情在发生，就是 AI 的动画也越来越多嘛。虽然我自己是不担心会被取代，但是你们会有这样子的讨论，担心被取代之类的吗？
Yeah, AI is a big topic these days because we don't know. I don't think it's at a level where it can do high-level Hollywood films yet. Because often with a lot of AI, what you get, it might be a shot, but it's not the shot that they want. So because it's just generated. And to repeat it several times and to also take notes from directors, and it's not good with that yet. I mean, who knows? It seems to do amazing things every day. There's something new. But it's also still got that kind of creepy factor to it. It doesn't feel great yet. And it might be difficult to go, you can get to 80% pretty quickly. And that's kind of where we're at now. But to get that last 20% could take 20 years. Who knows? I don't know where it's going to be. But it's definitely on the mind of every artist because they're kind of irritated that you press a button and there's the work. But yeah, I think it's a big worry. And I think it's going to have a huge impact on what we do. But it's kind of like when 2D animation went to 3D animation. Everyone thought 2D was going to go away forever. Oh, everyone wants 3D. There's still 2D animation animation out there. You know, it may just, we're gonna evolve. I don't know what it's gonna be yet. Hopefully I'm retired by the time it takes over, so we'll see.
OK，
那我想问一件事情，就是如果说以后真的在不远的未来 ，AI 可以做到事情变成老师说的从80%变到100%了的话，有什么能力是老师觉得 AI 怎么样都取代不了的？
Well, I mean, AI doesn't really come up with the idea. So there's going to take someone that has that vision of what they're creating, what the storytelling is. So it all comes back to just being storytellers. I think as far as being an artist, you're always going to be an artist and you're going to have to navigate what that means. Others might just say, this isn't for me. I don't want to create this kind of work. I want to go back to drawing and painting and just like go the other way. So yeah, you know, everybody's going to have to deal with it in their own way. But, you know, an artist is still going to be an artist and they're going to find a way to express themselves. And if that's not through a chat prompt, then that's okay.
那我们刚刚聊了一些就是比较沉重的东西，但我们现在拉回来聊一点轻松。就是因为老师之前来台湾的时候，你其实有特别拍了一个这个旅游 vlog， 你的这个主角是你做的动画人物，就是为什么会想要做这个影片？
I work on a lot of big budget, high profile movies. They're always for somebody else. So I wanted to do my own art at home and time's limited. I don't have a giant 500 person crew to work on this stuff. So I wanted to make a character that was fairly straightforward to animate and simple. And my wife is from Taiwan and we traveled here and I kind of fell in love with, you guys have a lot of really cute characters here. And like, oh, I want to make something like that. That's just a little more simple, but is very expressive and fun. So I kind of was inspired by that trip. And I thought, well, what if I just made little travel videos? But what if it was an animated character who was traveling and I could do that as we travel? Okay. So yeah, so I started putting that together. And as we would travel, I would just have my camera with me and it wouldn't matter where I'd have no plan. I'd just be wherever we were. I would start filming that and very quickly capture 360 images. So I'd have the lighting information later when I brought it back in. And then I would come back, take all that footage and I would edit it all together. And then I would kind of create my own little storyline of what this guy was during the day. So yeah, it was just a creative outlet for me that had nothing to do with trying to make a director happy or anything like that. I'm just like, I don't want any approvals on this. I just want to do it myself. Good, bad, or ugly, it's fine.
因为我们知道这把动画的角色带到现实的概念，其实也是你最近开了一个线上课的一个主轴嘛，就是想说在这个时候也可以顺便跟我们大家介绍一下，就是这是一堂怎么样子的课。
Yeah, my wife and I are here in Taiwan to create this course about what we do as far as animation in Hollywood. And we're going to go into techniques and thoughts and concepts that we use for animation. And I'm doing demos of different character rigs. And one section we're going to talk about is this kind of personal art thing and what you can do with that character. I made my process fairly simple compared to the really complicated pipeline we have in the visual effects studios, partly just out of a time saver for me and just kind of hitting the most important parts. But I'm translating that into this course so you can also do that yourself. So we'll take you through taking your drawing and turning it into a 3D character and then animating it and shooting some footage and you can put them in there and then post it on whatever social media you want. But I want to take that process and share it with people because I think it's really fun and I think it's really great. So people can watch this course and get something out of it and make their own animation and the more animation the better.
那再来也想请老师多分享一下，就是这堂课有哪些亮点，然后会适合哪样的人报名呢？
Yeah, so this course is suitable for any sort of designer or content creator because then you can take, instead of just having yourself in these videos, you can be with an animated character and they can advertise whatever you want. And it can be your character, so which is exactly what I wanted to do, is just have my own little thing that I've created and I can share with everybody. So yeah, it will take you through the process of how to get there.
那最后有没有什么我们刚刚没有提到但想要跟观众们分享的呢？
I think making big budget Hollywood films is fantastic and it's great. And it's something that has taken me to a level I never thought I'd be able to do. But that all starts with your personal work. And I think that's something that's really important for artists to continue to do, even when they're professional. So even if you're a professional graphic designer, any sort of artist, illustrator, always do your own work along with your client work. And that's fine. And I think that's something that, you know, it's inspired me to be able to work on this kind of stuff. And it's allowed me to come to Taiwan and share it with you. So I think that's, you know, something you should always keep in the back of your head of like, you know, it's great to do these big projects, but they're often for other people. So do work for yourself. It's inspiring and it makes your professional work better as well as your personal work.
那我们今天非常谢谢 Matt 老师精彩的分享。那这集就先到这边。如果大家喜欢今天的影片，不要把它分享出去，或是可以点这个地方看其他相关影片。那么今天这一期就到这边告一段落，我们就明晚再见喽，拜拜，
拜拜。
看完今天的访谈之后呢，相信大家都对于影视画面背后的动画特效有了更深入的认识。那如果你也想要学习好莱坞的特效技术，目前课程正在募资当中，在募资期间完成购课就能够享有低于5折的优惠，越早买越划算哦。另外，使用志祺77的专属折扣码强者我朋友可以再折350元。有兴趣的朋友就赶快点击资讯栏的链接去看看吧。